Hello, everyone. Today I am joined by Kelly Barber, who has been one of our members of Primal Trust and has been on a very amazing journey of healing from chronic pain. It sounds like it was pretty debilitating. And she has now claimed that she has been 100% healed from chronic pain. And so I know there's so many people that are going to want to hear your story and hear what you've done and find hope. So thank you for joining me today and sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes. Well, my first question is, tell us, everybody always wants to hear the story and the backstory. So if you could take a moment to take us through your journey, what you were dealing with, what your symptoms were, and how it all began.
Yeah, absolutely. So before Primal Trust, I was experiencing a tremendous amount of chronic pain. I had experienced it for about 5 years on and off. When it first started, it was, I thought, pretty minor. I thought pretty normal. You know, you work out, sometimes you throw your back out, it gets better after a few weeks. So I didn't think too much of it. But towards the end of last year, it really took a turn to something much more debilitating. And in the first iteration of my symptoms, I couldn't sit without being in just extraordinary pain. So I couldn't go to a restaurant with my boyfriend. I couldn't be in the car for 10 minutes to go to the grocery store without it being, just a really traumatic experience. But whenever I would stand up or walk around, I was totally fine. So it was a very perplexing situation where certain activities would be so painful and others would be totally fine. So I had a lot of trouble sleeping. I brought cushions everywhere I went to help manage pain. I obsessed over, can I take this flight to meet my friend's new baby because I can't sit on a plane for 2 hours. So it was a really, really challenging situation. But fortunately, I did come across John Sarno's work, and I read his book, Healing Back Pain, while at a meditation retreat. And that, fortunately, initially healed my symptoms. And so I thought, okay, I'm in the clear. This is great. But unfortunately, a few months later, my symptoms returned, much worse even than they'd been before for a longer period of time. And this time it really manifested as an inability to stand or walk without being in pain. So I couldn't stand for more than 2 seconds. I couldn't walk my dog anymore. My boyfriend had to take over every chore, everything. I couldn't go out with friends anymore. And that, lasted for several months. And, I tried a lot of different things, but really wasn't getting better. And until, fortunately, I went to a meditation retreat and met Michelle Palmer, who has been part of the Primal Trust community, and she recommended Primal Trust, and I joined from there. So, but that's what life looked like before Primal Trust.
When you were in that much pain, you said that you literally couldn't stand for more than like 10 seconds at a time. What did you think was going on? Like, what was your, people are always like, oh, what is this? What was your idea of what was going on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, initially, I think like most people, I assumed it was a physically rooted cause, that, I'd done a lot of CrossFit earlier in my life, and I probably had just injured my back, and, it was rooted in some sort of physical symptom. That's certainly what I thought initially. But I did have an inkling that it had to be more complicated than that, given that I could do some things and not others. And so I started to think there must be some sort of mental cause here, or a more complicated sort of mind-body connection. And that led me into kind of my own research in that vein. But, that was very difficult to wrap my head around because it's so outside of the mainstream and often not very scientifically rooted. And so it was quite a journey to try to understand what was causing that. But yeah, I think largely just sort of wrestling within myself of, is this a physical injury that I need to deal with, or is it something else that is more rooted in emotional or mental healing.
I think it's amazing that you found John Sarno in this process. He was, one of my early mentors when I was a physical therapist. And, about 20 years ago, when I was talking about Sarno, most people was looking at me like, what, and I was very fringe at the time, myself, as was he. And now it is this huge, thankfully, this huge thing where people are learning to understand TMS, John Sarno's work, and the need for pain reprocessing. And so I know that's some of the work that you did. Before we get there, tell me what you thought about as far as primal trust, nervous system work, linking it to your chronic pain. Was it like, oh yeah, that's definitely something I need to do? Or was there any hesitancy that you had to get over to make that leap? Tell us about that decision.
Yeah. Fortunately for myself, since I had already come across Sarno's work and I'd looked into some other practitioners like Nicole Sachs and some other individuals, I'd already been doing some of the practices around pain reprocessing a little bit on my own. And so it was fortunately not a brand new concept for me, which I do think helped me be, more open to it. But yeah, I think that honestly, a lot of times it's when you're in that more desperate position where you're just like, I will try anything at this point, and you become a lot more open-minded. But yeah, fortunately for me, I could tell that it felt like it was a pain or an issue with neuroplasticity with my brain, just sort of having become wired in an unhealthy way. So I was pretty open to that framework, and didn't have really any hesitations about trying the program, especially because I'd been trying to do it by myself for several months at that point. So I was really open and really excited to just have a community to connect with and know other people who were going through the same things I was.
That's amazing. And so then you joined Level 1 Regulate, our Level 1 program. And how long did it take for you to start to notice a shift in your symptoms with doing the nervous system work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for me, I started to notice improvements in my symptoms. I think it was after the second or third module. I was only actually, I completed the full Regulate program in about just under 3 months. I did love your advice to pace, and I took that very seriously. And I think I only ever did, one module in a 2-week or 1-week period. But fortunately, that worked for my schedule to kind of move at that pace. And so really within, I'd say, a month, I started to notice very gradual improvements, and it was very gradual. It wasn't overnight, but every week it was a little bit better. And towards the end, especially, there was a real shift in healing. So yeah, that was my experience.
What were some of the practices in Regulate that you found to be most beneficial to help with chronic pain?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that one of the key things that was most helpful for me was I realized throughout the program that I was very dissociated from my body, and just completely disconnected from my body, didn't know how to feel into my physical experience and how to interpret that. I'm a very cerebral person, so I tend to go through the world in my head, and I love living in my head and don't even notice things around me in my environment. And so I learned, I think, through this program how that had contributed to my symptoms and not living the best way I could be in accordance with myself. And so some of the practices that I found most helpful were those early practices of breath work, of the eye movement tracking, even just some of those really early things, just giving me space every day to check in with my body and learn how to feel what was happening in my body was really helpful for me, I think, in calming my nervous system.
I love what you've said, that you realized that you were somewhat chronically dissociated from the body, because that is what we see with a lot of somatosensory issues, chronic pain issues, is we can't find our needs, we can't feel our feelings very well. And sometimes we think we're feeling our feelings. We're very emotional, but we're in our head about it. We're not actually in our body, or we have a lot of stories and meaning about what we're feeling, but we're not just with that felt sense. And that is the journey of the chronic pain, is to ironically go into the thing that's painful, the body. Tell me about that experience for you. Like, what was that like to go into a body that was hurting, and how did you navigate the pain signals, but also knowing that you needed to pay attention?
Yeah. I think for me, well, one thing I'll say that was important for me and even resonating with this concept that I was dissociated was disconnecting what it means to be in touch with your body with stress, because I didn't feel like I was a very high, like in a high stress part of my life. Like my life felt like things were going really well. I was like, when I think about my emotions day to day, I'm not all over the place. I'm not worried. I'm not obsessing. I'm not ruminating about different things. So how could, there be these symptoms? Like how could, like what could be wrong here if I'm not, very depressed or anxious and things like that. And I think one of the lessons that was really spoke to me from Regulate was how your cell receptors can actually adapt to absorb higher levels of stress, and sort of your own understanding of your stress levels cannot always be accurate in terms of what your body is physically experiencing. And so that was, just as an aside, a very interesting and important concept for me, I think, in buying into a lot of what was taught in Regulate, of like why I even need to look internally into my body if I'm not externally feeling those emotional issues. And so for me, I think my experience of turning inwards and listening to my body, I think one thing that was important was I had already been doing a lot of that when I was in pain, and sort of that experience of being with the pain, meditating through the pain and breathing through it and sending messages of safety. I'd already been doing a lot of that, but I hadn't been doing a lot of being with my physical sensations in moments of peace or in just normal moments, when I wasn't in pain. And so I found those to be really helpful, to just listen when things were quiet and there wasn't much going on in my body. So I found that experience to just be very helpful for me, because I think sometimes when people tend to be more dissociated, they only pay attention when something feels really wrong. And sometimes you need to pay attention when things are going well, and just things are calm. And it's like those little quiet moments that you often need to listen, because there isn't so much noise. You can actually hear something, some of those more quiet messages within yourself. So hopefully that makes sense.
It was really profound what you've said. And I see this with so many people. They use these tools when they have symptoms, but they don't realize that the purpose of the tools, actually, the whole reason for nervous system work, is to come into the present moment. And what you're describing is that you chose to come into the present moment when things were good as well, and reroute your awareness that, wow, I have good moments. I am embodied and present, even in the good moment, as well as in the difficult moments. And we tend to get this bias of like, yeah, doing the work when we're symptomatic, and when we're not symptomatic, we're ignoring our body and back out there doing stuff until the body gets our attention and brings us back. So it's really profound. And also, you were telling me that you work full time. Were you working full time through this process and having to work full
It
time?
was.
So
Yes. Yeah. Mhm.
for those who are really busy, they're always like, how do you do this when you're working full time? Give us a little idea of what your daily schedule was like
Mhm.
doing these practices and working full time.
Yeah, definitely. So I am lucky in that I work from home. So I, work a typical kind of 9 to 5 job, sitting at my desk between those hours. And so for me with Primal Trust, I would do my tools, my practices in the morning. Honestly, not for even very long, 15 minutes. It wasn't I don't think I ever really even got up to an hour a day. It was, often just very little. And then at the end of the day, if I had a new module to do or to work through, I would watch a lecture or a Q&A, or, do some portion of that. And so I kind of structured my day that way. And that worked really well for me. And I also really tried to bring in, like you were saying, the tools and the concepts just throughout my day in whatever little passive ways I could, whether I'm taking a shower or doing the dishes or whatever the case may be, just sort of letting the messages kind of swirl around in my head, and really internalize them. I think I knew for sure that the biggest issue I was facing was that my body didn't feel safe and needing to send those messages of safety. And that, more than any tool that I did, was what mattered. And so even just constantly sending those messages to myself, I think made all the difference. So for me, that helped a lot with incorporating this into my schedule and not feeling like time was too much of an issue, because like you often say in the program, it's kind of counterproductive if you end up getting really stressed about working really hard to fit in the tools and doing 2 hours a day and things like that. So I just really tried to keep it pretty minimal.
So if someone's listening and they are like you were, in a lot of pain, could you walk us through what that self-talk in real life moment would be like? So imagine right now you're in a lot of pain. Tell us maybe what some of the self-talk was. What does that mean to find safety? How did you reframe? Just giving the audience an idea of a real life example of this mind shift.
Yeah, well, one concept that I have found to be really powerful, we were talking a little bit before we jumped on the interview about, I take a lot of inspiration from Hindu thought. And one of the concepts in Hinduism is this concept of rasa, and rasa means art. Or that's one translation of it. And, everything around you is art. Every experience that you have is art. Some art makes you feel ugly, some art makes you feel scared, some art makes you feel ugly, like sad. It's not always positive. And I think that is a concept I really brought into my life with chronic pain of, can I view this pain as just another form of rasa? This is something that I've walked into a part of the art museum that maybe I don't love. It's throwing me for a little bit of a loop, but let me try to be with it and be in here and experience it for what it is. And so that was something that I would tell myself when I was feeling pain, was, to just sort of observe it and be with it, even if it was difficult. And I think another concept that is also very deep in Hindu thought that helped me get through the pain and talk to myself when I was experiencing it was believing in my power. I think that a lot of people who experience chronic symptoms have this perception that they have them because they're weak. And I actually think that many people who experience these types of things experience them precisely because they're very powerful and strong people with a lot of potential. And sometimes that energy and that potential kind of goes outside of its bounds, and our bodies react in weird ways because we can't handle kind of how much energy is coursing through our bodies. And so I actually think that's actually a big part of what caused my symptoms. And so just reminding myself that I am powerful, I am strong, I don't need to fix anything. There's nothing here to fix. I'm complete and whole just the way I am. And to view every single moment as an opportunity to learn. I viewed my pain as my teacher. My pain every day, my pain was my teacher, and I would just ask, what can I learn from this? What are you here to teach me? So those were some of the things I would tell myself.
Those are both so beautiful. I mean, for those listening, those statements are very profound. Finding the art, sometimes I often say finding the beauty in whatever is here, and maybe that beauty has a lot of edges in the moment. And I also 100% feel that a lot of us who end up with chronic conditions have an incredible power, almost like we are people who bring, for whatever reason, a lot more energy through our system. And it's almost like our system blows its circuits, right?
Exactly.
And a lot of spiritual practices even talk about this kind of person, like we're able to just perceive and bring a lot of energy through. And I often describe the analogy that nervous system work is somewhat like updating the wiring of a house. So if you move into a house that was built, in the early 1900s, its electrical wiring is very outdated for 2023. And you need to update the wiring of the house. And the same thing for our bodies. For those of us who are just channeling a lot more energy through our system, nervous system regulation is like rewiring the wire of a house so that you have the more capacity to run energy through. So is that kind of what you're describing, where you feel like you have a lot of energy?
Exactly. Yeah. Which I think is such a beautiful, concept because it's so empowering. It takes away the shame and the embarrassment that, so many people feel. I'm a very confident person. I think I have really, high self-esteem, but during my chronic pain, you experience this irrational shame and embarrassment and self-blame for what you're experiencing. And understanding it the way that we've been describing it, it allows you to see again that who you are is so strong and so powerful, and your body just has to catch up, and you're strengthening your body to be able to you know pursue everything that you're capable of, really. So
What is different about you now post recovery versus 5 years ago when you first started getting chronic pain symptoms? Tell me about those two different identity types.
yeah, well, of course, the most obvious thing is the being symptom free and no longer experiencing pain, which is incredible. I a nice story with that is that I've been with my partner now for a while, and we were very close to wanting to get engaged when I was experiencing all of my chronic pain, and that didn't feel like a great time to get engaged. I literally don't think I could stand up while he would be kneeling, and I would think about like, oh, I can't stand up for a ceremony. I can't even envision our wedding, which was so heartbreaking. And so one really cool outcome of my pain going away was we did get engaged. My fiance and I, we got to go on a beautiful trip through the mountains, and I got to hike, and we're planning our future together. So that was a very tangible outcome of my symptoms going away. But I think on a more kind of personal level, I also think a lot about who I am has changed, what matters to me, how I go about the world. Before Primal Trust and earlier in my 20s, I was a very, I don't know if type A is the right word, but kind of type A, very intense personality, overachiever, worked 70 hours a week and did CrossFit 5 days a week, and just, just go. And I've over time very gradually mellowed out and found a lot more balance and enjoyed more quiet and things like that. But I think that really solidified through Primal Trust and my journey with chronic pain of not feeling so attached to doing things and achieving things, but more being present, like being instead of doing, like just that being who I am as a person. Like that's what matters to me. And, that's really guided how I go about my daily life, and just a much healthier relationship with things like exercise and work and allowing change to happen in my life. So I think that's a big change. And then the last thing I'd share that's really interesting is before my chronic pain, my whole life, I was someone who was always so hungry. Like I had the craziest metabolism. I could not go like 2 hours without eating, or I'd have these crazy energy crashes and these like just be the most hangry person in the world. And that was just who I thought I was. And it was very frustrating to live that way. And interestingly, after my chronic pain went away, that completely changed that part of who I am. I, have a much more regulated metabolism. I, can go longer without eating, and I don't have crazy energy crashes. So I just think that's really interesting, because that was my whole life. I was that way, and overnight almost it completely changed. So I think that's a pretty interesting change as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you had somewhat of a sympathetic overdrive affecting blood sugars and things like that, and that
Yeah.
you've rebalanced that with learning to be present and pay attention to the body. Now, what kind of practices do you still do to maintain where you're at for people who are curious?
Yeah. So my practices today, I really believe in like a morning routine. So I always journal in the morning. I do a little reading from Sanskrit or from Hinduism, and then I write down 3 things I'm grateful for. And then I ask myself, what is my intuition for the day? So it's kind of a fun question. I'm like, what is my body or my spirit telling me to pay attention to today or to focus on today, and listen to whatever comes up and try to keep that in mind. And that helps ground me. And then I like to do some sort of physical practice, whether it's hamstring stretching or, a little bit of yoga or a quick core workout or something like that. So that's a big part of my day. And then really that's mostly it. I think mornings are really important. And then just trying to be really mindful of how I use my free time. But those are really the main practices. So it's interesting. I don't really do a lot of the core primal trust practices anymore, but I mean, again, as we've talked about, like it's the messaging of it, it's the bigger picture of it. And that's part of every day for me and always will be. So yeah.
You've made it more of a lifestyle of who you are, which the ultimate focus of Primal Trust is to just be more embodied, more in the
Mhm.
present moment, and more trusting of life itself. And so I'd say you are still definitely practicing that. I love that routine. I think you've hit a few really important points for people with this kind of condition. Journaling is huge. Checking in with your intuition, which helps to keep a part of your brain known as your insula communicating properly between the prefrontal cortex and the body, and that's highly involved in regulating pain signals and things. And and the movement, that you're somebody who moves your body every day. And it doesn't need to be a huge thing. It's just a matter of carving that time where you matter and you do the things that keep your system cleaned and primed. And that's great, truly.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other 2 things that I didn't mention that I just thought of is I do like walking, like just going
Mhm.
for as many walks as I can, and then meditating, whether that's a formal meditation practice or kind of just sitting and looking around at the trees and things like that. So spending time in nature. So those are a few
Mhm.
other things I'd recommend.
Beautiful. This is really great. And I'm so, so happy to hear of your story and that you're able to share it and give hope to people with chronic pain. Because there really is hope. Like, no matter how long you've had it, we are neuroplastic and we change. And you can change your brain to reprocess pain for sure. So, a parting note, I always like to have people ask if you have a parting word of wisdom or advice for, I know you've given a ton of advice, but if there's any other inspired words as we close the interview?
Yeah, I think one concept that I would offer is, when I was in my pain, it's a 24/7 job. It's all you're either in pain or you're anticipating the next time you're going to be in pain, you're planning around it, and it's so hard. Like it was the hardest thing I've ever gone through. And I remember when I was really in the midst of it thinking, my biggest fear is that this is going to go away, but it's going to come back, and not being able to grapple with that. Like, oh, I can't imagine it coming back. And I think for me, it's inspiring because being on the other side of it now, I'm not afraid of that. Like if my symptoms were to come back or I experience something new in the future, I don't feel afraid of that. I feel very confident that I would, know how to work through it, and be patient and trust the process and trust myself. And I think that's the biggest gift, is not living in fear anymore and having trust and resilience in myself. And so if you're in that situation where you feel that way now, just I would encourage you to know that, you will get through it. You will be on the other side of it. And that fear, because I think the fear is the worst part of all of this, much more than the pain or all the other things, that fear is going to be behind you one day, and you're going to be, even stronger. So yeah, and I agree. I think people, always have room to improve and to grow and to work through these things, no matter how long they've been dealing with them. My mom has really chronic migraines, and she's had them since she was 8 years old. And I mean, just debilitating, can't get out of bed. And she's been dealing with that her entire life. And, in the last 5 years, it's beautiful. We've found the same solutions, the same resources on our own individual paths. And she's still finding healing, but it's already made such a difference in her life. And she hasn't given up despite it, that despite the fact that she's gone 50 years living in a certain way. And so it's never too late. And, you also can't really understand or know how much your journey of healing is going to impact the people around you, the people that you love, and how that's going to open up new relationships and inspiration for other people. So, stay with it.
That's so beautiful. And what you've shared to me is the true recovery. There's the recovery of my symptoms are gone, but the true recovery is I'm not afraid if they come back. And that gave me chills, because when someone gets to that point, you have found freedom and you've found primal trust, and you are embodying it, because it's not about being, life has its bumps. It's about knowing you're going to handle it, knowing you're that powerful that you can handle what comes your way. So thank you for speaking to that. And I've loved this interview. I've loved getting to hear your story. It's going to inspire so many people. And I'm so happy about your engagement and your life, and that you just took that responsibility of believing in yourself and not giving up and looking outside the box, and loving yourself enough to do this work.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. The program was obviously so transformational for me. And I think, the way in which you're able to bring science and empathy and personal experience all into one package, it speaks to everyone. And I couldn't recommend it enough. And I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing. And yeah, I would love to help however I can.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me for the interview today.
Thanks.